I met him on the occasion of his first show here in '89. And he was the most lively and spirited artist that I had met. He was just full of optimism and full of good cheer and wishing that everything would be in its highest mode. And he still does.
I think he is tortured by the state of the world. But he always looks outwards. I think he's not an introvert. I think he would not wish to be thought of as a tortured artist personally at all. He wants to be thought of as an artist, expressing things to the rest of the world.
I think it's just so interesting to work with him, you know, when you put an exhibition together, because you're sure that it's going to be superbly beautiful and it's going to be entrancing, enhancing, and life-changing in a sense. You can spend hours in front of them in different lights. They look different in the morning, in the evening, at night, you know, depending on the amount of light you see on the gold, the silver. You know, they're almost living beings in a sense.
My relationship with Yoshida is already more than 20 years old. He has taken me to understand much more about the role of the artist in society than anyone else that I have ever met. And I asked this to Yoshida in a couple of occasions, say, well, what do you feel when the people cry in front of your works? He said, well, if the people feel the same intensity of the work as when I am creating it, then we are both praying.
Watakushi wa Yoshida Kenji to moushimasu. 私は戦争が激しくなった時も子供の時から戦争でした。だからどうしても生とか死を考えざるを得ませんでした。けれども、軍隊に入って、特別の訓練を受けた時、
Kamikaze is the Japanese name for it. Fanatical death dives that are now the enemy's chief weapon. Aerial harakiri in a desperate attempt to smash our fleets.
もっとそれは身近なものになりました。戦争が終わった時、それが大きな体験になって今も生きております。生まれは日本の大阪ですが、東京に15年住んで、あとパリへ来て43年住んでおります。私が生まれた町は昔から京都、第二の京都と言われた芸術品だとか芸術家がたくさん京都と行き来した町です。家にもそういう作品がありました。私はと違う兄と小さい時から、その家にある作品についていろいろと目にしてきました。それは、私の絵にとって白とか黒とか、金とか銀とか形とかパピエの白さとかいろんなことを心の中に焼き付けました。それが今も大きな影響を与えております。
He uses many shapes in his paintings, particularly the spheres, literal spheres, which he uses in the most extraordinarily dynamic way. You have a wonderful sphere, but it always seems to be moving as if it's rolling somewhere. And again, I think this is like the planets, the stars. It is as if looking out into the sky at things in perpetual movement. In his latest paintings, he has reduced these spheres to very great simplicity and power, where they are as still as he can make them, but at the same time they are moving, just as we know a star that looks fixed in the sky is always moving and always turning.
私の金の銀は最初はいろいろな具体的なものから描き始めて、だんだん大きな空間意識を持つようになると抽象的な表現になっていきました。でその中で色、形というものがどのような意味を持っているかとどんどん深く深く追求したとき、20年経って気がついたら白と黒の世界に入っていました。そしてまた10年20年と色を追求していったときに白黒を統一したものが金銀光であるというようになったのです。だから絵を描き出してからそれまでに30年から40年はかかりました。
I think the thing about Yoshida that really strikes me about his work, because it's not like anybody else's, is that he's trying to paint the cosmos, he's trying to paint the universe, quite literally. And not many artists attempt that. You can see hints of it perhaps in some of Van Gogh. But on the whole, artists who are trying to look at the meaning of life in that sort of abstract way go for pure abstraction.
There is a lot of tension in the shapes that collide or not collide. You never know if these shapes are getting closer or they are separating. And that is one of the beauties that hold their strength to these paintings, to these works.
I think that Japanese aesthetic is already sparse. But the beauty is enormous, and it's it looks simple. A Japanese garden, Japanese architecture, so that those elements I see in his work. And it's interesting that you asked me about calligraphy, because calligraphy is really a high discipline where you make a stroke very much based on many elements, your inner self, the exercises you're doing, your visualization, whatever that is. So, yes, he would use those ways to make his paintings, I'm sure.
色というものを考えるときに、 いろいろと考えを進めていくと白と黒というのが究極のところにあると上極、ですから、黒はあらゆるものを吸収する、白はあらゆるものを吐き出し発散するというそういう大きな意味を持っていると。でそれは一つ黒だけではダメだ、白だけではダメだと。白と黒が一つになって初めて一つのことを言っているのだというように、考えるようになりました。それでいいかな。
A way for him to start the day, you know, after he has breakfast, sometimes I stay with him, I'm forced to the discipline. He has and then he starts doing something that will take him half an hour, maybe a little drawing or a construction or some little maquette or something. He looks at it, does it very well, and destroys it. Once I asked him, why do you do that? If it was going so well, why do you do that? And he said, I'm ready to create now. So the formula is, you have an inner impetus to destroy something. You better do it ahead. As a way of just pushing the creativity. Because it's very small, but it's not his fault. You see?
Come ça.
A lot of the space is taken by the old print of, you know, this printer where he used to do his engravings, but he has not the strength anymore.
Okay.
So that photograph that you know of him painting is here.
Yeah.
That's also from the museum, the British Museum show.
Well, I suppose I like that.
Oh, salut. On terminé? Ça va?
Oui, Yoshida, c'est plus une atmosphère de studio. Pas nécessaire. Doucement, parce que la caméra c'est roulante. Vous n'avez pas un blanc. I couldn't ask him to prepare it for
Don't take that. 어제야 그래야나.
Or like if he has something of him in the army or something, that would do.
Non, vous avez une photo de vous à l'armée, Yoshida?
Oui.
Vous?
Oui.
Vous? Okay. Apparently yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mais c'est comme ça, moi, comment tout ensemble.
Everybody, we all started studying together, but they're dead. They were dead during the war.
8つか野沢après Saluta.
That's Yoshida, as a young man. Stanley Hayter, Picasso, ici Apelles Fenosa, Kenji Yoshida.
Oh, is he wearing some fedora or something?
No, it's one of the circles in the painting. It looks like a halo.
It's a halo, man.
We touch in conversation the fact of how other cultures, when they want to revere their deities, they always use gold or silver or the metals are always something we don't understand. I remember talking with some painters that were studying and they were very amazed that he was using metals because they were taught in the school that these were no colors. So they were kind of, don't touch them because they are not colors. In reality, they are not. They are minerals, they reflect light. And I think he had no doubt that the reverence that humankind has to deity and using gold and silver because there is something very instinctively mysterious about it. I mean, there's a reflection and doesn't stop in an emotion. It goes to some part of the intellect and also hits the instincts. We haven't found anything more beautiful than gold, I think, as humans, no?
Mm. 私は中小具象という区別を持ちません。だから、ただ私は吉田賢治という一人の人間であると考えています。生きている人はみんな一人の市民として私と同じように生きてくださっていると考えております。言い換えれば、すべての人々は芸術家であり、抽象的な、具象的なんではなくて、同じ世界で生きていると思っています。
Every artist wants to be on the world stage and for his own way, for the way he manifests his art. And you don't want to be categorized by any category.
I don't think you can compare Yoshida to any of his contemporaries at that time. He doesn't look like any of them. And that is one reason art historians find him very hard to talk about, I think, because you can't say, right, he's a neo-expressionist or whatever, anything like that. What is Yoshida? What name could you put on him? You can't. There was a whole generation, which Yoshida is one, who could not travel, during the war years, except to war zones, of course. And they couldn't travel in the first 5 or 6 years after World War II because of the occupation. And the habit of going abroad, which had been so strong among Japanese artists up to that, before that time, was lost. But the moment they could travel again, the younger generation, of which he was one, really wanted to go abroad and look at the whole international scene, because international art, particularly abstract art, had been discouraged by the Japanese government during the war years as being, suspect because it wasn't Japanese enough, shall we say. So Yoshida was one of a group who went mainly to Paris in the late 50s and early 60s. I'm thinking of Sugai Kumi, for example, who became a very prominent abstract painter and was there at the same time as Yoshida. He'd been to Paris since 1964 to learn etching and other print techniques from Stanley Hayter in Atelier 17. And he'd worked incredibly hard to develop a technique which could express what he wanted to say. And just at this point, he's realizing what he wants to say. It's not figurative. There are figurative areas around the black center, which might be flowers, they might be stars, they might be anything. And he is realizing that from the blackness, he wants to find light. He's spoken about this in later years. The blackness is himself, in fact, the whole of life within him. And from it, he is trying to find what he wants to express.
Paris is where all the great artists go to cut loose and see what they really know and get influenced by all those interesting characters that are around. It's a mecca.
外国に住めば住むほどそこに住んでいるという気は強くなります。それと反対に同じように自分は日本人で日本で育ってきたんだという、思いが強くなります。その2つがあって初めてここに住んでいるのだなという感じに歌えております。でそれは43年の生活体験から得た結論です。そして、パリで、43年住んだ時、パリの街が世界中の多くの人々が共に住む街であり、私に多くの違った世界を見せてくれました。それが私を大いに助けてくれたことになっております。今一つはフランス政府もそのようなことを知って私にアトリエと住まいを与えてくれました。今一つは、また住むための席として画家組合の一員にも加えてくれました。大変私にとっては意味のある街になっております。
When I took him to Mexico in 91, and I got him a studio, quite large actually. It was, well, not a studio, but it was a large hotel bedroom, a large pensione bedroom. So I bought him those craft papers, rolls of craft paper, and he was, painting, but then really coming back to his origins as a calligrapher. So we bought some ink, and some of these are 45 centimeters wide, some of them are 90 centimeters wide, which is the length more or less that he can reach easily with his arm because he's a tiny man. And he was very happy during the times. It was the first time he visited a tropical country. He was discovering new plants and new fruits and all sorts of new ideas, but also he was finding all these shapes in the Mayans very alike the old Japanese styles. There is not a drop out of place, so one can immediately feel the joy and the control, and at the same time the chance that he was taking in these craft papers, which would later give him the show at the British Museum. He was the first man alive ever to show there in a retrospective in the Japanese galleries.
There was something in that sort of rather wild, ferocious spirit that attracted me a lot. And it was these scrolls that convinced me that we should have an exhibition of his work at the British Museum, which we did in 1993.
His palette changed. When I went back to Paris to visit him after the show in Mexico, I was totally moved. And because the way he had used the colors, he changed from that very black, gold and silver palette to, we have cobalt blues and we have great greens. And the things that he saw there, so it made an impact on him that slowly has been integrated now in the simplicity in the later years. But I think he broke the fact that the brilliant colors also exist in nature. You tend to forget that in Paris, or you tend to forget that in London. You tend to forget how brilliant are the colors in other parts, and the Japanese tend to stick to primary colors when they are really following the Japanese tradition. They hardly mix colors. They don't like brown skies, as they call the Japanese painters that try to go very much into Western art, that they start mixing the colors and turning paintings that would lose that fact that is Japanese.
世界の人々はそれぞれ違った環境に生きています。だから同じことを、表現しても違った表現方法になります。絵も音楽も舞踏も、書もみんなそれぞれ違ったような表現になりますけれども、もっとその表現を深く自分のものにしたら、その表現されていることが 僕が考えている私が考えていることと同じだなというようになっていきます。それを知らなければ他の作品を知らなければそういうことは実感として捉えられないですけれども、私は43年の間にもうアラブいろんなエジプトいろんなところに行ってそれを実感してきました。見れば見るほど違ったように見える世界がと自分のところに入ってきて、しかもこれは自分が持っていないおらないもっと大きな世界知らない世界を示しているなというように、そうすると自分のそうやって客観性がと広がり、自分の空間とか意識がと大きなものになっていくと。だからもうそれをやっていればどんどん広がるからどこまで行くか分かりません。それが無限の空間、神が与えた空間だと思っています。
When you are in front of Yoshida's works, you feel that there is somebody alive there, and also the works are alive. That's why he titled it before everything. Every single painting is called living, or the act of living, or life. I mean, such a difficult word to translate into English, seimei or hinochi, because it means the life force, or also means the act of living. And that he takes him that very seriously. So these works are part of his act of living. To take his works without the spirituality is very difficult. One has to refer to abstraction forms of philosophy or abstraction beliefs, or the belief that there is a harmony. Without belonging to any organized religion, one can see that there is a great empathy with the concept of the divine.
I think a lot of this comes from the Shinto religion. Any Japanese Buddhist will also be Shinto, whether they want to be or not. It's just in their nature. Shinto sees unity in everything and spirits in everything. And I think Yoshida, in his long years in France, has seen that the gods of Shinto and the gods of Buddhism are the same as those in Christianity and Islam.
命というのは一つの固まったものではない。そういうふうに決めて捉えることはできないほど大きな量の空間と深さを持っていますと、考えの世界の。だから一つの、我々が命というものを頭で考えたり何か手を捉えたりできるものではなくて、もっと我々がそういう世界から超越して感じこの5体を持ってパッと感じ取り、その中へ入っていって初めて分かるものだと。でそれがだから神というものが存在すると。神は誰も知りません。だけれども命というのは神の分身ですから、それで神の声も聞かなければいけなくなります。
I think his profound desire to express the wonder of what he feels is the ultimate motivation behind his work. I think he's one of the great religious artists of the 20th century.
その光が我々のこの闇の心を照らし出して、そしてお前は何をすべきか、どのように生きるのかということを教えてくれることになると。だから私の金や銀は色としてはなし、神の光を発してくれるとして。
Of course, he was always very interested in comparing how people respond to prayer. He used to go to churches and see people kneeling, and then he understood So he wanted to combine both things by, making this act of prayer his moment of work. And that is where he found the objectivity that sometimes is so striking. It forces to look at his work as if they were images of in a church or sacred with certain silence. So it's something, it's a dialogue with yourself, and I think that was one of his quests.
それは一つの表現ですから、私が描く形、色、そういうものがどこから出ているかということを考えてもらって、一番最初に来るのは自分の気持ちをもう一度外へ出してしまって無にして私の絵を見てほしいと。でその時に私の絵が何を言おうとしているかは光と色でこちらに伝えてくると。それが分かるはずですと。でそれが神の声だと思ってくださいと。
Going into his studio for him is really going into communication with the spirit that moves the earth in the sense of positivism or creation. I have no doubt about it.
命というものは、神が与えてくれたものとの他には考える術がありません。ですから、このような命を与えてくださった神は何をなすために与えてくださったのかということを、考えなければなりません。それを、考えるときはやはり神様の言葉をしかないと自分一人の頭ではできません。でそれを聞くのがお祈りをするという行いです。
He has lived the life, in some ways, of a bohemian, a classic French bohemian artist. But he has never been part of a recognisable circle of people. I think he's kept his freedom very carefully. And he has always painted what he wanted to. He has found it difficult to exhibit, especially early on. And when he went on from prints, which are easier to get exhibited, onto larger paintings, I think he had a very hard time.
Well, it's also the same in Gerald Wild's case, and it really takes an enormous work, daily work, to get an artist in the right museums, in the right people's minds. But once it takes, then it takes quite quickly. But you have to get it out.
I think, the legacy will also be very much determined as to how much we can make with him. Because, art is art, and art promotion, that's a very delicate balance. You have to have the artist with the art, but at the same time you have to have a body of people who promote that art and turn it into a legacy Because, if it's art that remains in the studio, then it might be beautiful work, but that only a handful of people can see. But our real task at this point is to really, open the public's eyes and make his work available in major institutions so his work can be seen.
The Japanese, are perhaps even more than we are in the West, like to be able to place people and say who they are. They like names, they like brand names. They like to know who you are. When young Japanese artists come to the West, come to Paris, I've heard this happen in Yoshida's presence, they tell you who their father is and that sort of thing, which is quite un-Western, but very important in Japan. So he hasn't got people back in Japan associated with him who would keep pressing for his work to be shown. I think that is the penalty he has paid myself for the artistic and personal freedom he has had living in France.
If he were to go and back and live there and decide to die there, then I guess they will be putting much more effort or attention in him.
I've mainly, when I was involved in sales, sold Yoshida's works not to Japanese art collectors. They would be maybe European, Australian, American. Those would have the great response to the work, those who would trust their own feeling about the work of art, and buy it simply because they saw the beauty of it.
One day, a real Japanese critic living in Japan will take up his cause and write seriously about him, and then he will be taken on very quickly.
He already made his grave in Paris. He already went there and he himself chiseled his name, and his wife is buried there, and he had decided to remain in Paris because I guess Paris is the country of adoption, or the city of adoption, because of the community of artists and the international idea that he has of one single living entity, which is all humankind, and I think Paris represents that.
Il faut nettoyer pour voir les noms.
Is this it?
Yes. She said, incredible. She said, yesterday I cleaned it. Look. Oh, Yoshida, it's natural, eh? She said he took all the leaves yesterday. Mais montrer les noms in japonais, Yoshida, because he himself. You see the signs?
What design?
Well, he says it's his own design. Oui, mais qui a fait la pierre comme ça, tac, tac, tac.
moi.
Et qu'est-ce qu'il dit? Yoshida.
In order to succeed, nowadays does one have to make that political social circuit. Political mean not in government so much as there's the politics of biennales, there's the politics of art fairs, there's so much, and it's all to do with prestige, who you know, the money involved, and strategies.
In recognition, the country that has given him more recognition is England. We had the British Museum here, and we had the tour of the cathedrals, Norwich, Canterbury, and probably Durham. And then he has had several exhibitions in small galleries around the country. People love it. That's it. Life support has been given in France. The studio. He has 37 years in the same studio in central Paris. Nice studio, back to the rafters. Nice little house. Inside an apartment. And of course his heart is in Japan. That is undeniable. I mean, he would like to have this recognition in Japan. I would like to have Japan participating in safeguarding this man's work. Paris, by giving him the studio, for so many years and the flat, they have the right to come and select, which in a way is all right, you pay back. If that will mean that they will preserve some of the works for posterity, fine. But if that will mean that those works will go just to a vault and they get rotten there, then I'm not sure. But I'm not an expert in those matters, so I really don't know. You know, we would like to have a museum of note to accept 1/4 of his production.
It is a great pleasure for me to welcome you tonight for the exhibition of the Japanese artist Kenji Yoshida. To better comprehend Mr. Yoshida's work, it is necessary to understand the death and destruction that he experienced during the Second World War in Japan. He came so close to death that thereafter his art has been a celebration of life. The artist once said, "I want each of my paintings to be a prayer for peace." And I am convinced that such an exhibition is a further step towards constructing the defense of peace in the minds of men.
They're going to remember him for the mood of the marvelous. A man who could make the mood of the marvelous happen.
Oh, it's a great inspiration. It's a great inspiration and a very dear friend.
You know, I'm always looking for the shaman, wherever they are. And I guess that's at the heart of all the things that I'm very interested in, is to find those beings who are transmitting levels of knowledge on many different subjects. And Yoshida transmits an energy. And if you can pick up on that energy, and it's like, oh, Hazu made us the same. Robert Williams, oh, he did the same. And so you catch that energy, and I want some of that. I want to know how to do that. I want to become that.
吉田は神から命をもらった人としていつも命の大切さと平和の大切さを言い伝えてきた人として次の受け取るのが私だというように受け取ってほしいが私の願いです。どこもの待てもや。
Friends, I do not know if what I will say will be understood by all, but I have no other way to say it. And this may be also just the way our friend was, a communicator from the heart with no need for words. We will not see Yoshida-san again as we have seen him for so many years. We cannot seek his advice anymore, and already missing him has its poignancy. The light and joy of his presence has gone out. Under this stone is all of him that was mortal. He mastered life. He managed to die young, as late as it was possible. But with his works, he will be eternally present. They will shine in the history of mankind, and his life will be an example of the quest of a great individual that wanted to show that peace and beauty are one single unit. He was a real fighter for this cause, and his humanity encompassed all that is brilliant, sincere, and meaningful. If I were to choose a metaphor to compare his life, it would be that of the beautifully crafted sword that had the potential but was never used to harm. Art and life were no different forces in him, and living poetry was the reason of his being. Life always felt so full when spending time with him, and nothing else mattered but the present. These last days, when exploring his living quarters, I discovered many stones that he collected from the different places he visited in his travels. Some of them had been gilded and signed. Others have the names and dates of their provenance, and some others are left unmarked. They were placed around the edges of the floor, or in shelves, or arranged as marks of invisible roads. I am very moved by the idea of him surrounding his work, his actions, and his sleep with reliquaries of his days. In fact, his whole apartment was full of objects impregnated with magic and meaning. As any of you who entered it saw, it was a real magician's cave. Many times I asked Monsieur Yoshida what would happen with all his collected objects and accumulated things. He candidly replied that he would just die in the middle of the atelier and c'est fini le problème. Muchas gracias por esa vida maravillosa, Maestro Yoshida.
いつか来た道また帰る道。昭和58年新州福田生